The wind howled through the cracked window panes of an old diner on the outskirts of town. Its faded red sign flickered, casting weak neon glows over the wet asphalt below. Inside, the scent of burnt coffee and fried potatoes lingered like a memory too stubborn to leave. Jenna wiped down a table for the 5th time, more out of habit than need. Her hands were rough, her apron stained, her eyes tired but kind. Life hadn't been easy for her. Not since the divorce, not since her ex vanished without child support, and certainly not since her mother passed, leaving her with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, to raise alone. The diner barely paid enough to keep the heat on, but it was steady. It was all she had. It was 9:42 p.m. when the bell above the door jingled gently. Jenna didn't look up right away. It was late for a customer. But when she did, she paused mid-wipe. A small boy stood in the doorway, no older than 7. His coat was 2 sizes too big, sleeves dangling past his fingers. His hair stuck to his forehead from the drizzle outside, and his shoes, if you could call them that, were thin, waterlogged sneakers with flapping soles. He looked like a shadow of a child. He didn't speak. "Hey there," Jenna said softly, putting the rag aside and moving around the counter. "You lost, sweetheart?" The boy looked at her, eyes wide and glassy. He said nothing but stared at the bowl of soup on a nearby table, half-eaten and abandoned by a customer who'd left in a hurry. Her heart broke a little. She knelt down. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The boy nodded. Jenna didn't ask more. She didn't need a backstory or explanation. Some instincts speak louder than reason. She led him to a booth near the heater, fetched a clean bowl, and filled it with hot tomato soup. She added a grilled cheese sandwich and set a tall glass of milk beside it. The boy devoured the food like he hadn't eaten in days. Jenna sat across from him, resting her elbows on the table. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Mason," he murmured through a mouthful of bread. "Where are your parents, Mason?" He looked away. "Gone." She didn't press further. Instead, she slid over a napkin and watched him eat. Outside, the rain began to fall harder. After dinner, she made a bed for him in the booth using 2 clean tablecloths and her spare jacket. She locked the diner door and turned the sign to closed. Tonight, she wouldn't send him back into the storm. She didn't know it yet, but that decision would change her life forever. The next morning, Jenna was back behind the counter, stirring coffee as Lily colored in a corner booth. Mason sat beside her, shy but smiling, helping shade in a dragon's wings. Felt peaceful. Then the black SUV pulled up. It was too new, too sleek, too out of place for this part of town. Its windows were tinted dark, the engine purring like a predator. Jenna froze as 2 men in sharp black suits stepped out. They didn't look like they were there for a meal. One scanned the diner with clinical precision. The other held a phone, speaking into it. Jenna's heart pounded. She glanced at Mason. He stiffened, dropping his crayon. His eyes widened with recognition and fear. "Mason?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He bolted from the booth, darting behind the counter like a rabbit sensing a hawk overhead. Jenna instinctively stepped in front of him as the door jingled and the men entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. The taller man eyed her, then looked around. "We're looking for a child. He's been missing for 48 hours. May have been seen near this area." Jenna felt her stomach twist. "A child?" "Yes, 7 years old. Brown hair. Name is Mason Whitmore." That last name hit like a slap. Whitmore. Everyone in the state knew that name. Benjamin Whitmore was a tech billionaire, founder of Neuronet, a reclusive genius worth billions. His face was rarely in the media, but his name was synonymous with money, power, and controversy. But this child, this quiet, hungry boy, was his son? She turned slightly, as if shielding Mason from their view. "Haven't seen anyone like that," she lied. The man narrowed his eyes. "If you do, call this number." He slid a card onto the counter, then turned to leave. But as he reached the door, the phone rang in his hand. He answered and stopped cold. His eyes flicked back to Jenna and the counter behind her. He hung up, We're going to have to ask you to step aside, ma'am. Jenna stood her ground. He's scared. Tell me why a billionaire's child is wandering alone in the rain. Why was he starving? The other man moved past her, ignoring her words. Mason clung to the edge of her apron. Don't let them take me, he whispered. It broke her heart. Stand down, a third voice said. From the door, everyone turned. A man in a charcoal coat stepped in. He wasn't tall, but he radiated gravity. His presence sucked the sound from the room. His eyes, piercing steel gray, landed directly on Mason. Jenna recognized him immediately. Benjamin Whitmore. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at the boy who was supposed to be his son. Mason, he said softly. I've been looking everywhere. Mason's grip tightened on Jenna's apron. You left me, Mason whispered. You said you'd be back. You weren't. Whitmore took a breath. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. Regret? Pain? Jenna finally spoke. If this is your child, why was he wandering alone? Why was he starving? Whitmore's eyes shifted to her. Because someone I trusted to care for him betrayed that trust. I didn't know until it was too late. I've been searching every hour since. His voice was low, haunted. Mason's lower lip trembled. You promised. Whitmore knelt down, ignoring the wet floor and his pristine coat. And I broke that promise. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Mason didn't move. He looked up at Jenna. She knelt beside him. It's okay, sweetheart. You have to let the people who love you fix things. But they need to know how. Mason hesitated, then slowly stepped toward his father. Whitmore pulled him into his arms. But before leaving, he turned to Jenna. Thank you, he said. You fed my son. You protected him. I owe you more than you know. Then, just like that, they were gone. But Jenna's life was only beginning to change. It had been 2 days since Mason left the diner in his father's arms. And yet, Jenna still heard his voice in the corners of her mind. Soft, timid, grateful. She sat on the edge of her creaky bed, staring out the small apartment window as early morning light filtered through a broken blind. Lily slept soundly in the next room, curled under 2 blankets. Unaware of the whirlwind her mother's heart was caught in. Jenna wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe that she'd never see Mason again. Maybe that Whitmore would vanish into the high-rise world he came from, leaving the memory of that rainy night behind like a piece of unwanted luggage. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. At the diner, she just started the morning shift when a dark car pulled up again. Sleek, unmistakable. Her stomach sank, but she wiped her hands on her apron and forced herself outside. This time, it wasn't Whitmore's security team. It was Whitmore himself. He stepped out without ceremony, dressed in a tailored gray coat, scarf tucked neatly at the collar. His eyes searched hers, softer now, less guarded. I know this is unorthodox, he began, but I'd like to speak with you. Over coffee, if you're willing. Jenna hesitated. Her first instinct was to shut the door on anything complicated. But curiosity, maybe even concern, got the better of her. She nodded. Inside, the diner was quiet. A single trucker nursed coffee in the corner, reading a newspaper. The radio hummed softly in the background. Whitmore slid into a booth. Jenna poured 2 cups of coffee and joined him, sitting across from one of the richest men in the country, trying not to feel like she was floating out of her own skin. You run this place? He asked, not as a formality, but as if the answer mattered. No, she replied. I just work here. I clean, cook, fill in when someone doesn't show up. He nodded. You do more than that. They sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, Mason hasn't stopped talking about you, or your daughter. He said you treated him like family. No questions, no conditions. I didn't know who he was, Jenna said simply. That's what makes it remarkable. He paused. You protected him, without knowing what you were risking. Jenna folded her hands. I didn't think about that. He was just a scared little boy. Whitmore leaned forward. That's exactly why I'm here. She frowned. What do you mean? He exhaled, tapping his fingers once on the table. I don't trust the people around me anymore. Not after what happened. My inner circle was compromised. Mason's caretaker, someone vetted and paid well, left him unattended for over a day in the middle of a city he barely knew. I can't let something like that happen again. Her throat tightened. So, what are you saying? I'm asking you, he said, voice even but sincere, to consider coming to work for me. For Mason. Jenna blinked. Me? As what? A nanny? A companion? A safe presence? Someone he trusts? I'll compensate you more than fairly. 6 figures. Housing included. Healthcare for you and your daughter. Private schooling for Lily. It didn't sound real. It sounded like one of those stories you read in magazines. Someone plucked from obscurity and handed a life they couldn't imagine. She shook her head slowly. I'm not qualified for something like that. Whitmore studied her. You're exactly qualified. You didn't need credentials to save my son. You just needed heart. Her hands trembled under the table. What about my life here? I can't just leave. Lily's school, my rent. I'll handle everything, he said gently but firmly. Your apartment's lease is month to month. I've already looked into it. Your manager here, Stan, said he'd give you a glowing reference. He also mentioned how you haven't missed a shift in 3 years. Jenna's lips parted. You looked into me? He didn't flinch. Of course. I had to know who took care of my son. And everything I found tells me you're a woman who sacrifices for others, even when no one notices. That's exactly the kind of person I want near Mason. The booth fell silent again. Jenna stared into her coffee, the steam curling up like ghosted questions. Could she really do this? Could she leave everything behind for a life she didn't ask for, but might finally deserve? I'd want Lily close, she said finally. No boarding school. I want her with me. Absolutely, he replied without hesitation. You'll both stay in my residence in Willowgate until we find a permanent solution that feels like home. Willowgate. The name alone carried weight. It was where the elite lived behind walls and trees and gates with golden crests. She still couldn't fully process it. But, she added, you need to promise me something. Anything. You have to be there. Not just the money. Not just the security. Mason doesn't want things. He wants you. For the first time, Whitmore's composure cracked. A faint shimmer crossed his eyes, and he nodded. I swear. Jenna reached for the napkin on the table, needing to fidget, needing to breathe. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She was just trying to survive. She didn't plan on becoming a lifeline to a billionaire's broken family. But here it was, and she was saying yes. That evening, Jenna told Lily over a quiet dinner of mac and cheese. Her daughter blinked at her. We're moving into a castle? Jenna laughed through the lump in her throat. Something like that. Will there be dragons? Jenna grinned. No dragons. Just a boy who needs a friend. By the weekend, a black car waited outside her apartment. Movers handled her few possessions with care. Lily held her stuffed bear in one hand and her mother's hand in the other. Jenna looked back at the chipped doorway, the rusted mailbox, the sagging floorboards of the only home they'd known together. And then she turned forward, to a world she never expected to enter. As the car drove away, she didn't see the man watching from across the street, hidden in the shadow of a brick alleyway. A man who didn't want Mason found. A man who'd profited from the boy's disappearance. And now Jenna was in his way. Willowgate was everything Jenna expected and nothing she was prepared for. The estate was nestled in rolling hills behind wrought iron gates guarded by men in tailored black uniforms. The drive was lined with sycamore trees, their branches arching like a tunnel, ushering them into a world so pristine it felt almost artificial. The mansion itself stood like something out of a fairy tale. Stone walls, tall windows, ivy crawling up the sides like time had tried to touch it and failed. It was breathtaking yet intimidating. A place designed for a different kind of person, a different kind of life. And yet, inside its cold walls, Jenna found warmth. Not from the chandeliers or marble floors, but in the way Mason smiled when he saw her and Lily step into the foyer. You came, he whispered, half in disbelief. We made a deal, didn't we? Jenna said, kneeling down to hug him. And I keep my promises. From that moment, Mason clung to her like a shadow. Lily quickly became his partner in exploration. Two children who should have been from opposite worlds, now laughing in the echo of hallways bigger than any street they'd known. But as days turned into weeks, Jenna noticed cracks behind the luxury. Whitmore was kind but distant. He worked late hours, spoke in quiet tones, and often stared too long out the window. Mason loved him, that much was clear. But there was something between them, a heaviness unspoken. One evening, after reading the kids to sleep, Jenna wandered into the library, a vast room lined with ancient books and leather chairs. Whitmore sat alone, drink in hand, a tablet glowing faintly on his lap. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked softly. He looked up, eyes weary. "Sleep's a luxury for people not trying to undo mistakes." She hesitated, then sat across from him. "Tell me the truth," she said. "What really happened to Mason? I mean all of it." He sighed. The silence stretched. "I left him with a trusted aide, someone I thought loyal. Her name was Vanessa Holt. She was his caretaker for nearly a year. Quiet, efficient. But I missed the signs. I didn't realize she was leaking corporate intel to competitors. When I confronted her, she disappeared and took Mason with her." Jenna's heart dropped. She kidnapped him? She framed it as a disappearance to buy time. "My team found traces of encrypted messages, offshore payments. She had help, a network. But by the time we put it together, she'd vanished completely. I feared the worst, until you found him." Jenna felt a chill move through her. "But why Mason?" "Because he's leverage. I'm about to launch something that will change how the world communicates. The stakes are astronomical. My enemies knew that hurting me meant starting with the one thing I truly care about." Jenna absorbed this. The pieces were falling into place. "But someone was watching us," she said, remembering that odd moment before they left her apartment. "I felt it." "You think Vanessa is still out there?" He nodded grimly. "I know she is." The next morning, the peace shattered. It began with a power outage. Strange, for a mansion with backup generators and full-time staff. Jenna had just finished dressing Lily when the lights flickered out, followed by a low humming sound that vibrated the walls. Then came the alarm, shrill, pulsing, disorienting. Jenna scooped Lily into her arms and ran down the corridor, meeting Whitmore in the main hallway. He held Mason tightly, barking orders into a phone. "Security breach at the north entrance," he snapped. "Evacuate Protocol Delta now." Jenna's heart pounded. "What's happening?" Whitmore turned, pale but composed. "Get to the safe room. No questions. Follow Ramirez." A woman in tactical black appeared at Jenna's side. "Ma'am, this way." She grabbed Mason's hand, her own daughter clinging to her leg, and followed the woman down a concealed stairwell behind a bookcase. The air was cooler, the passage silent except for the echo of their hurried steps. The safe room was sleek, sterile, steel walls, screens monitoring every inch of the property. They entered just as the vault door sealed shut behind them with a deep, metallic groan. Jenna pulled the kids close, breath ragged. "Is Daddy okay?" Mason asked. Jenna nodded, even though she wasn't sure. They waited in tense silence. 10 minutes, 15. Then the screen buzzed to life. Whitmore's face appeared, blood on his temple, but breathing. "I'm fine," he said quickly. Security neutralized the threat. No casualties. "Jenna, thank you for staying calm." "What happened?" she asked. "They tried to cut the power, get in through the garage entrance. Vanessa's signature's all over it. This was a warning. She knows you're with us now." Jenna's blood ran cold. Mason trembled beside her. And in that moment, Jenna realized this wasn't just about protecting a child anymore. It was about uncovering something deeper, something darker. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a target. That night, once the children were asleep, Whitmore found her standing on the terrace, overlooking the grounds now crawling with extra guards. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" For dragging you into this. I thought bringing you here would make you safer. I see now it only painted a larger target on your back. Jenna turned to him. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in with my eyes open. But if I'm staying, I want more than paychecks and guards. He tilted his head. What do you want? The truth. The whole truth. And a say in how this ends. Whitmore studied her for a moment, then gave the faintest smile. Then we start tomorrow. Far beyond the estate, in a hidden warehouse lined with screens and stolen data, Vanessa Holt watched the live feed on a laptop. She zoomed in on Jenna's face. This one, she murmured to a man beside her, face scarred and eyes hollow, is going to be a problem. The man cracked his knuckles. Then I'll make sure she disappears like the last one. Vanessa smiled. Do it clean. No traces. Benjamin Whitmore doesn't get to win. The next morning dawned unusually quiet. No birdsong. No distant hum of early morning maintenance across the estate. Just a thick, unnatural silence that made Jenna's skin prickle as she helped Lily into her sweater. Mason stood near the window, arms folded, peering out at the security personnel patrolling the hedges. Why do they all look so serious? He asked. Jenna forced a smile. It's just extra safety. Your dad wants to make sure we're protected. But she didn't believe it herself. She could feel it in the air. Like the calm before a storm. Something was coming. By mid-morning, Whitmore gathered them all in the main living room, his team flanking the walls like statues. On the center table sat a set of documents, a laptop, and a red folder labeled Project Dominion. I owe you both the truth, he began, eyes darting to Jenna, then resting on Mason. And I don't just mean about Vanessa. He walked to the windows, exhaling slowly. 3 years ago, I began development on a communications AI platform designed to intercept and interpret global signals. Satellite, encrypted radio, dark net threads. It started as a way to protect business interests, but it evolved into something bigger. He turned. The system can predict threats, not just from competitors but from rogue nations, cyber-terrorists. It's what intelligence agencies dream about, and that's exactly why it became dangerous. Jenna's eyes widened. You made something governments would kill to control. Whitmore nodded grimly. And Vanessa sold pieces of it to the highest bidder. He tapped a few keys on the laptop, bringing up a live map. It pulsed with red dots scattered across major cities. She tried to dismantle the system from the inside. When I caught her, I quietly shut everything down. Buried the project under shell companies and off-grid servers. Mason listened in silence, holding Lily's hand tightly. But why take Mason? Jenna asked. Because I locked the core access behind biometric verification, mine and Mason's. Vanessa needed him alive, not just as leverage, but as a key. Jenna felt like the floor beneath her shifted. You turned your child into a password? It was meant to protect him. I never thought. He trailed off, voice heavy with regret. I never imagined she'd go this far. Outside, a black SUV rolled up to the estate gates. The intercom buzzed. One of Whitmore's men stepped outside to intercept it, but something in his expression, even from inside, told Jenna this wasn't routine. Seconds later, an alarm lit up across the security dashboard. Whitmore's security chief leaned in. Sir, we've got a drone feed showing multiple heat signatures approaching from the south field, military gear, masked. Whitmore didn't blink. Evacuation protocol. Get the children inside the vault. But Mason didn't move. No, he said. Every time this happens, you leave and I don't see you again. Whitmore knelt. Mason, I swear to you, I'll come back. But I need you to trust Jenna. She'll keep you safe. Jenna knelt too, touching his shoulder. We'll go together. You and me and Lily. We'll play that secret agent game you taught us. Remember? Mason hesitated, eyes darting to his father. Then slowly he nodded. The moment they entered the underground corridor again, the house above rumbled. Jenna's heart raced. She grabbed Mason and Lily tighter. Behind them, the steel door groaned shut just as they heard an explosion rock the east wing. In the dim vault, Jenna scanned the surveillance feeds. Smoke poured through shattered hallways. Vanessa's men moved with terrifying precision, silent, ruthless, methodical. And yet, she wasn't after destruction. They bypassed valuables, ignored the server rooms. They were headed for one thing, the biometric terminal in Whitmore's study. Jenna turned to the kids, then to the panel beside the room's command system. There's a backup access route through the tunnels. We're not staying down here. Mason looked up. Where are we going? To stop her. She grabbed a small key from beneath the console. A maintenance override Whitmore had shown her on day 2. She opened a hidden panel in the back of the vault, revealing a narrow tunnel that led under the estate. The route was tight, dark, and damp. Lily held Jenna's hand like a lifeline. Mason moved faster, guiding the way through sheer instinct. Above, the floor occasionally shook with muffled bangs. Halfway through, they stopped beneath a grate that opened into the east wing, just below the study. Jenna climbed carefully and pushed it open just enough to hear voices above. "She's here," came Vanessa's voice, smooth, deliberate. "The child is in the vault, but we'll open it." Benjamin was always so predictable. Another voice, a man's, deeper. "What if she escapes again?" Vanessa chuckled. "Then we burn the place to the ground." Jenna's mind spun. They weren't just after access, they wanted to erase every trace of dominion, and everyone connected to it. She pulled back, whispering to Mason, "We need to find your dad. Now." He pointed down the tunnel. "There's another grate, near the west stairwell. That's where he goes to hide when he's sad." Jenna felt a twist in her chest at those words. 10 minutes later, they emerged from the tunnels behind a collapsed section of the mansion. Dust choked the air. The walls were scorched but standing. She moved fast, Mason close behind. In the corridor, just beyond a shattered door, they found him, Whitmore, bruised but alive, pinned behind fallen beams. "Jenna?" he gasped. "Mason, don't talk," she said. "We're getting you out." With effort, they freed him, using debris as leverage. But the sound of approaching boots stopped them cold. Vanessa's men. Jenna pushed the children behind her. Whitmore rose unsteadily. "You have a weapon?" she whispered. He shook his head. "Just resolve." Jenna picked up a metal rod from the debris. "Good enough." Footsteps closed in. 5 shadows at the far end of the corridor. Jenna stood her ground, until gunfire rang out from behind the attackers. Whitmore's own team, having regrouped, stormed the hallway in a flurry of precision and gunmetal. Within seconds, the intruders were down, zip-tied and unconscious. A familiar voice called out, "We've secured the estate. Vanessa's still unaccounted for." Whitmore sagged with relief. Jenna looked down at Mason and Lily, trembling but safe. But her relief was brief, because Vanessa hadn't been captured. And somewhere not far from this mansion, she was still watching. The cleanup took hours. Fires extinguished, bodies removed, and every inch of the estate combed for traps or evidence. Jenna sat beside Mason and Lily in the library, now dimly lit and half covered in ash. A once pristine mansion had turned into a fortress marked by battle. Whitmore moved like a ghost through his own home. His custom-tailored suit was torn, one arm bandaged, face lined deeper with guilt than pain. "She's still out there," he said to Jenna, who'd barely spoken since they escaped the tunnel. "Vanessa doesn't leave loose ends." Jenna nodded. "And now she knows I'm one of them." He sat across from her. "You didn't sign up for this. I never wanted you or the kids dragged into it. But we are," she said softly. "The moment I opened that apartment door to Mason, this became my fight, too." A silence settled between them. "I need to finish what I started," he said finally. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone I can trust, not just with my company, but with Mason, with truth, with survival." Jenna looked over at the boy she had once fed on a rainy night with no idea who he truly was. He was still that boy, scared, sweet, resilient. And he was now something more, a piece of a much larger story. Target. A key. "Then let's end this," she said. Together, that night they made a plan. Vanessa's final move was predictable in its boldness. Surveillance intel revealed encrypted chatter from a remote offshore facility that used a relay point disguised as a non-profit research center. The pattern matched her past infiltration tactics, disguised truth as philanthropy. Whitmore had once invested in that very facility. Vanessa was using his own empire against him. "We hit it tomorrow," he told his operations chief. Quietly, no authorities. "She disappears for good, or we do." Jenna stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm going too." Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Absolutely not. You brought me into this war," she replied. "Let me be more than a shield." A long pause. Then he nodded. "Then suit up." The facility rose from the ocean like a scar. Angular metal nestled into the rocks of a private island, fog swirling at its edges. Their team arrived by stealth boat at dawn. Inside, the corridors were surgical and white, but Jenna could feel the rot beneath it. She followed Whitmore through silent halls until they reached the central chamber, the command room. And there, surrounded by glowing panels and cables plugged into a central core, stood Vanessa Holt. She didn't flinch when she saw them. "Ben," she said with a smile, "I was wondering how long it would take you to come to me." Her voice was venom wrapped in silk. She turned her gaze to Jenna. "And the Good Samaritan, the poor woman with the golden heart. Did you really think you mattered?" "I matter enough that you tried to kill me," Jenna said evenly. Vanessa laughed. "No, I only tried to erase your illusion. You don't belong in his world. Neither does that child." "Mason." The words ignited something in Jenna. "You're wrong," she said. "I belong wherever love exists. And that boy, your bargaining chip, is more human than you'll ever be." Vanessa tilted her head, amused. "Touching. But it doesn't matter anymore. I've already uploaded the data. Dominion's core code is in my hands." Whitmore stepped forward. "You'll never control it. Watch me." She pressed a button on her device. A countdown appeared on the central monitor. Dominion upload, 98% complete. Whitmore surged forward, but a blast of electricity surged through the floor. Vanessa grinned, triumphant. "This is my legacy now." But she'd made a mistake, underestimating Jenna. While Whitmore drew Vanessa's attention, Jenna crept around the back of the console. She saw the power core wired to a junction box. Risky but possible. She grabbed a loose rod and jammed it into the circuit. Sparks flew. The room flickered. Vanessa screamed. The countdown froze. Upload failed. Connection terminated. Smoke billowed as systems began overloading. Alarms blared. Jenna grabbed Whitmore's hand and they ran. Vanessa lunged, but a ceiling panel crashed down, blocking her path. The room filled with chaos. Shouting, fire, and panic. By the time they reached the dock, the facility behind them was already going up in flames. The team pulled them onto the boat just as the sky turned orange. They didn't look back. Back in the city, Whitmore took a breath for the first time in days. Vanessa's fate remained uncertain. Her body wasn't found, but her empire had collapsed. Dominion's secrets were safe. The mansion was being rebuilt. So was trust. And one evening, as twilight danced across the trees, Jenna sat on the balcony of her new home. Still on the estate, but with a garden and a view Mason said reminded him of the street with the soup place. Lily played nearby with Mason, their laughter the music of healing. Whitmore joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You saved everything," he said. "No," she replied, smiling. "Just what mattered." He leaned against the railing. "You were the light in all of this, Jenna. You saw a boy in need, and never once thought about what you could get in return." She glanced at him. "You're wrong." He looked surprised. She smiled softly. "I got everything. Purpose, family, and the knowledge that even in a world filled with wealth and power, a single act of kindness can change the course of someone's life." Whitmore nodded, and for once, his shoulders relaxed. Below, Mason looked up. "Dad, Jenna, we built a rocket from pillows." They laughed, rising from their seats to join them. because the past had burned away in fire, and what remained was something stronger. Not just survival, but love, and the unshakable bond that began with a bowl of soup on a cold